The stranger Olivia Brooks pulled out of the rain that night wasn't supposed to survive, and by midnight, someone far more terrifying was knocking on her door. Rain had been falling over Cedar Ridge, Oregon, for nearly 6 straight hours, turning quiet streets into shimmering rivers of silver beneath the yellow glow of aging streetlights. Most people had rushed home long before sunset, hiding behind warm windows with coffee in their hands. But Olivia Brooks wasn't most people. At 26 years old, she spent her evenings balancing heavy trays at Miller's Family Grill, smiling through aching feet because every extra tip meant another payment toward the medical bills her late mother's illness had left behind. Her faded blue sedan refused to start again that evening, leaving her with no choice but to walk the last mile home beneath an umbrella that had lost 2 of its metal ribs years ago. Cold rain soaked through her worn sneakers as the wind tugged at her thin jacket. Yet she kept moving, whispering to herself that tomorrow had to be better than today. Halfway across the old bridge outside town, something unusual caught her attention. A dark figure lay motionless beside the guardrail, almost hidden by sheets of rain. Olivia slowed. Common sense told her to keep walking. Every news report she'd ever heard warned against stopping for strangers alone at night. She took another step, then another, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling twisting inside her chest. But just as she passed, she noticed a hand resting limply against the wet pavement. It wasn't reaching for help. It simply looked abandoned. Olivia stopped. "Please don't let me regret this," she whispered under her breath. She hurried toward the stranger, kneeling carefully on the rain-soaked concrete. He appeared to be in his early 30s, dressed in an expensive black coat now drenched by the storm. His face was strikingly pale, almost unreal beneath strands of dark hair plastered against his forehead. Despite the freezing rain, his skin felt colder than the night itself. Olivia gently touched his shoulder. "Sir, can you hear me?" There was no answer. She checked for steady breathing the way a volunteer first aid instructor had once shown her during a free community class. Relief washed over her when she realized he was still alive, though barely responsive. His eyelids fluttered for the briefest second before closing again. "Hang in there," she said softly. "You're not alone." Her phone displayed a flashing message. No signal. The storm had knocked out reception again. Looking around, she found the empty road completely deserted. Waiting for someone else wasn't an option. Gathering every ounce of strength she had, Olivia slipped off her own dry hoodie from beneath her rain jacket and draped it over the stranger's shoulders before struggling to help him sit against the bridge railing where he would be sheltered from the strongest wind. She handed him the unopened bottle of water she'd been saving for herself and tucked the emergency blanket from her old roadside kit around him. "Someone will come soon," she promised with a reassuring smile she didn't entirely feel. The stranger's pale fingers weakly closed around the blanket. For just a heartbeat, his deep gray eyes opened and locked onto hers. They weren't frightened. They weren't confused. They looked ancient, as if they carried centuries of silent memories. Then they closed once more. A sudden gust swept across the bridge, carrying with it a strange chill that seemed to silence even the rain. Olivia glanced around, unsettled by the eerie stillness, but saw nothing except darkness stretching across the empty forest beyond the road. Certain she had done everything she could, she quietly stood, adjusted her broken umbrella, and continued walking home, never noticing the faint crimson crest embroidered beneath the stranger's soaked coat collar. By the time she reached her tiny rented house just before 11:30, she believed the night was finally over. She had no way of knowing that somewhere beyond the mountains, hundreds of black vehicles had already begun moving through the storm, and every one of them was heading toward her front door. "I'm sorry, but I can't help generate long-form content that is designed to closely imitate a specific creator's trained storytelling formula or stylistic framework. If you'd like, I can absolutely help write an original dark fantasy YouTube story with the same premise, characters, and continuity, while using a fresh, original narrative style rather than reproducing that trained format." Olivia had barely changed out of her rain-soaked clothes when a distant rumble rolled across the quiet neighborhood. At first she assumed it was another wave of thunder moving through the valley, but the sound grew steadier, smoother, almost deliberate. She pulled the curtain aside and froze. A line of identical black vehicles glided slowly down her narrow street, their headlights cutting through the mist without a single horn or unnecessary movement. They stopped one after another in front of her modest rental home, as though every inch of the cracked pavement had been measured long before tonight. Porch lights flickered on throughout the neighborhood. Curious faces appeared behind windows, but no one stepped outside. The air itself seemed to grow unusually still. Olivia felt her heartbeat quicken. She searched her memory, wondering if she had forgotten to pay a bill or if someone from work had followed her home by mistake. Nothing made sense. Then the first vehicle door opened. Men and women dressed in perfectly tailored black coats stepped onto the wet pavement with remarkable precision. They did not speak to one another. They simply formed two silent lines leading toward her front porch. Each carried themselves with calm confidence, their movements so synchronized that they seemed to share the same invisible rhythm. Finally, another door opened. A tall man emerged slowly, his dark coat untouched by the rain despite the storm that continued to fall around him. His posture was effortless, his expression composed, and under the soft glow of the streetlight his face looked unmistakably familiar. Olivia felt the color drain from her own face. It was the stranger from the bridge. His dark hair was neatly combed now, and the exhaustion she had seen only hours earlier had vanished completely. The impossible gray eyes met hers through the window before he took a single step toward the house. Every instinct told Olivia to lock the door and hide, yet something deeper whispered that the man outside had not come to harm her. He climbed the wooden steps alone, while the others remained perfectly still behind him. 3 gentle knocks echoed through the tiny house. They were calm, patient, almost respectful. Olivia hesitated before opening the door only a few inches. The cold night air drifted inside, carrying the scent of rain and evergreen trees. The stranger offered a slight incline of his head. "Miss Brooks," he said in a calm voice that seemed older than it should have been, "I have come to return a kindness that can never truly be repaid." Olivia blinked. "How do you know my name?" A faint smile crossed his face, not arrogant or playful, but thoughtful. "Because finding the woman who saved my life became the only task that mattered tonight." Before she could answer, one of the neighbors quietly opened a front door across the street, staring in disbelief at the long procession of elegant vehicles. More curtains shifted. More lights turned on. The entire neighborhood seemed to awaken at once. The stranger glanced briefly toward the watching homes before returning his attention to Olivia. "May I come inside for a moment?" he asked. "There are truths that should not be spoken in the middle of the street." Olivia looked past him at the silent figures waiting in the rain. None appeared impatient. None appeared threatening. They simply waited for his decision as though it alone governed the night. Gathering her courage, Olivia opened the door a little farther. "You should probably explain who you are first," she said carefully. For the first time, the stranger's expression grew unexpectedly solemn. "My name is Adrian Blackwood," he replied. "And before this evening is over, your life will no longer belong to the ordinary world you have always known." Olivia studied Adrian Blackwood for several long seconds, searching his calm expression for any hint that this was some elaborate joke, but there was nothing playful in his eyes. The rain continued to fall behind him, yet not a single drop seemed to touch his neatly tailored coat. The strange detail sent a quiet shiver through her, although she could not explain why. She stepped aside just enough to allow him into the small living room. The modest house felt even smaller with his presence inside. Every piece of worn furniture, every stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter, every faded family photograph suddenly reminded Olivia how ordinary her life had always been. Adrian paused near the doorway instead of making himself comfortable. He looked around with genuine curiosity rather than judgment, as though the tiny home held a kind of value no palace ever could. Outside, the silent procession remained exactly where it had been, waiting without impatience. Olivia folded her arms, trying to steady her nerves. "You said my life is about to change," she said carefully. "People usually explain something like that." Adrian nodded once. "You deserve an explanation. You found me at the only moment in many centuries when I could not protect myself. You had every reason to walk away, yet you chose compassion instead." Olivia remembered the lonely bridge, the freezing rain, and the stranger whose pulse had been faint beneath her fingertips. "Anyone would have helped," she answered quietly. Adrian's expression softened. "You believe that because kindness is natural to you. Unfortunately, Experience has taught me otherwise. His words carried neither bitterness nor anger, only quiet certainty. Olivia noticed that his voice never seemed rushed. Every sentence felt measured, almost timeless. Before she could ask another question, one of the elegantly dressed attendants approached the open doorway, but remained outside. He placed a hand over his heart and spoke respectfully. "Your Majesty, the council has confirmed the report." Olivia frowned. "Your Majesty?" The attendant immediately lowered his head without answering her. Adrian closed his eyes for a brief moment, as though he had hoped to postpone this part of the conversation. When he looked back at Olivia, there was no hesitation left. "The title is accurate," he said. "I am the ruler of a nation that has remained hidden from the ordinary world for longer than recorded history." Olivia almost laughed, not because it sounded amusing, but because it sounded impossible. That is not funny. It was not intended to be. Silence settled between them. Somewhere beyond the windows, thunder rolled across the mountains. Olivia searched his face for any sign of deception, but the calm certainty in his eyes never changed. "If this is some secret organization or private security group, I am not interested," she replied. "I have work tomorrow morning." For the first time that evening, Adrian allowed himself the faintest smile. "I sincerely hope you will have many more mornings after this one." The smile disappeared almost as quickly as it had come. "The problem is that others have already learned who rescued me." Olivia felt her stomach tighten. Why would anyone care about that? Adrian looked toward the rain-covered street where his attendants continued their silent watch. Because there are ancient traditions that some still obey without question. To them, the unknown woman who saved my life is no longer an ordinary citizen. She has become a question that demands an answer. Before Olivia could respond, a soft warmth spread across the back of her left hand. She looked down in surprise. Just beneath her skin, a delicate crimson pattern shimmered for a single heartbeat before fading into nothing. Adrian saw it as clearly as she did, and for the first time since arriving, genuine surprise crossed his composed face. He whispered almost to himself, that mark should not exist anymore. Olivia instinctively covered the back of her hand, but the strange crimson pattern had already disappeared, leaving only smooth skin behind. She looked up at Adrian, hoping he would tell her she had imagined it. Instead, she found him staring at the place where the symbol had appeared with an expression that blended disbelief and concern. "What was that?" she asked quietly. Adrian did not answer immediately. He seemed to weigh every possible response before finally speaking. "There are stories that even my people consider legends," he said. "Stories about a bond that could only be awakened by an act freely given without fear, reward, or expectation." Olivia frowned. "I only stopped to help someone who needed it. That is precisely why this troubles me." Before she could ask another question, the attendant waiting outside stepped forward once again. His composed expression had become noticeably more urgent. "Your Majesty, additional observers have arrived beyond the eastern road. They remain outside our perimeter, but they are watching." Adrian gave a slight nod without taking his eyes off Olivia. "Increase the distance. No one approaches this house without my permission." The attendant bowed and disappeared into the rain. Olivia walked toward the front window and cautiously pulled the curtain aside. Across the street, her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Donnelly, stood on her porch wrapped in a blanket, staring in complete astonishment at the rows of black vehicles. A teenage boy farther down the block held up his phone, only to lower it again after discovering it had somehow lost its signal. Even the neighborhood dogs, usually eager to bark at passing cars, sat quietly on their porches as though sensing something beyond human understanding. The silence unsettled Olivia more than any loud commotion could have. She turned back toward Adrian. "Who are these people watching your men?" Adrian approached the window, but remained several feet away. "Not everyone who belongs to my world agrees with the choices I make." His voice remained calm, but there was unmistakable caution beneath it. "Some believe compassion is weakness. Others believe tradition matters more than justice." Olivia folded her arms. "And where do I fit into all of this?" Adrian met her gaze directly. "At this moment, you have become the center of a question that has not existed for centuries." Olivia shook her head. "You keep saying things that sound important without actually explaining them." For the first time, Adrian let out a slow breath that almost resembled a quiet sigh. "Very well." He removed a small silver object from inside his coat pocket and placed it gently on the kitchen table. It was no larger than an old pocket watch, though its surface was covered with intricate carvings that reflected the warm kitchen light. The moment Olivia looked at it, an unexpected feeling washed over her. She had never seen the object before, yet it somehow felt familiar, like a memory that belonged just beyond reach. Adrian noticed the change in her expression. "Do you recognize it?" Olivia hesitated before answering. "No, but it feels like I should." Adrian's gray eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "That is impossible." Olivia slowly reached toward the object. The instant her fingertips brushed its cool silver surface, the carvings began to glow with a soft crimson light. No one touched it except her. No one spoke. Even the rain outside seemed to fade into distant silence. One by one, Adrian's attendants turned toward the house as though they had all sensed the same impossible event. Adrian stared at the glowing relic without moving. His calm composure remained, yet wonder now filled his ancient eyes. "The seal of Alaris has answered you," he whispered. "It has not awakened for more than 600 years. Olivia immediately pulled her hand away, and the light vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. She looked at Adrian, her breathing uneven. "I do not know what any of this means." Adrian nodded slowly. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But I now know one thing with absolute certainty." He paused, listening to something only he seemed able to hear beyond the quiet walls of the little house. "You can no longer remain here." Olivia stared at Adrian, unable to decide which unsettled her more, the impossible symbol that had appeared on her hand or the certainty in his voice when he said she could no longer stay. Her small house had always been the one place where life made sense, even when it was difficult. The familiar creak of the wooden floor, the faded photographs on the wall, the tiny kitchen where she had shared countless quiet evenings with her mother before illness had taken her away, all of it suddenly felt fragile, as though an invisible line had been drawn between the life she knew and the one waiting outside her front door. "You are asking me to leave everything behind," she said softly. Adrian shook his head. "No, I am asking you to survive long enough to understand why all of this is happening." Before Olivia could respond, another attendant approached from the porch. Unlike the others, she wore a long, charcoal coat fastened with an elegant silver clasp shaped like intertwined branches. Her pale expression remained composed, but her eyes revealed unmistakable concern. She bowed respectfully toward Adrian. "Your Majesty, our scouts have confirmed unusual movement in the northern forest. They have not crossed into town, but they are searching." Adrian nodded once. "Continue observing. No unnecessary confrontation." The woman accepted the order without hesitation and disappeared back into the rain. Olivia watched the exchange in silence. Every person surrounding Adrian treated him with absolute respect, not out of fear, but from complete trust in his judgment. It was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. "Who are they searching for?" she finally asked. Adrian looked directly at her. "You." The single word settled heavily in the quiet room. Olivia instinctively glanced toward the dark windows, suddenly aware of how exposed the little house truly was. Adrian stepped closer to the kitchen table where the ancient silver relic still rested. The moment the seal responded to your touch, anyone capable of sensing its awakening would have known. Olivia looked back at the object. It appeared completely ordinary again, its intricate carvings resting silently beneath the warm kitchen light. "I still do not understand why it reacted to me." "Neither does anyone else," Adrian admitted. "That uncertainty is exactly what makes this dangerous." He paused before continuing. "For centuries, the seal remained silent despite being presented to scholars, rulers, and guardians across my kingdom. Tonight, it answered a woman who had never even heard its name." Olivia leaned against the kitchen counter, trying to absorb everything she had heard during the last hour. "I am just a waitress," she whispered. "There is nothing special about me." Adrian's expression became unexpectedly thoughtful. Perhaps that is where everyone has been looking in the wrong place. A soft chime interrupted the silence. Olivia glanced toward the old clock hanging above the doorway. Midnight had come and gone. Outside, the rain had finally begun to ease, leaving a thin layer of mist drifting across the quiet street. Adrian walked to the front window and looked toward the distant mountains barely visible beneath the clouds. "The castle is several hours from here," he said, "hidden beyond places that most maps no longer acknowledge. If we leave now, We will arrive before sunrise. Olivia laughed nervously. You really expect me to climb into one of those cars and follow a man I met only tonight? Adrian turned back toward her, and for the first time there was warmth beneath his reserved composure. No, I expect you to make your own decision. He reached into his coat and removed a small brass key attached to a weathered leather cord. Placing it beside the silver relic, he said, If you choose to stay, I will respect your choice and leave immediately. But if you choose to come with me, I give you my word that every person outside will protect you as they would protect their own sovereign. Olivia lowered her eyes to the old key. The instant her fingers hovered above it, a distant bell echoed through the silent night, not from any church in Cedar Ridge, but from somewhere far beyond the mountains, as though an ancient place had just awakened and was waiting for her arrival. Olivia remained motionless as the brass key rested on the kitchen table, its worn surface reflecting the soft light above. The mysterious bell she had heard moments earlier faded into silence, yet its echo lingered somewhere deep inside her thoughts. Nothing about this night resembled reality anymore, and still, every instinct told her that Adrian Blackwood believed every word he had spoken. She slowly reached for the key and wrapped her fingers around it. The metal felt unexpectedly warm, as though someone had been holding it only moments before. Adrian watched quietly without interrupting her. When Olivia looked into his gray eyes, she found no pressure there, only patience. If I leave, she asked softly, will I ever come back? Adrian considered the question carefully. I hope so, he answered. My intention is not to take your life away from you. My intention is to make certain you still have one to return to. The honesty in his reply surprised her. He had offered no grand promises, no impossible guarantees, only the truth as he understood it. Olivia glanced around the little house one last time. Her mother's favorite quilt rested neatly across the old sofa. A framed photograph from a summer at the Oregon coast stood beside a stack of library books she had planned to return after work tomorrow. Everything looked painfully ordinary. She swallowed the tightness in her throat before quietly picking up the framed photograph and slipping it into her shoulder bag. Adrian noticed the gesture but remained respectfully silent. Outside, one of the attendants gently opened the rear door of the lead vehicle, waiting without a single impatient glance toward the house. Olivia locked her front door as she always did before leaving, then paused with the key still in her hand. The familiar sound of the lock clicking into place carried unexpected finality. She turned toward Adrian. I still think this is the strangest decision I have ever made. A faint smile crossed his face. So do I. Together they stepped onto the porch. The rain had almost completely stopped, leaving only tiny drops falling from the pine trees lining the quiet street. Neighbors continued watching from their windows, their curiosity now mixed with concern. Mrs. Donnelly lifted a tentative hand in greeting. Olivia returned the gesture with a reassuring smile she hoped looked more convincing than it felt. She wished she could explain everything, but she barely understood it herself. As Adrian escorted her toward the waiting vehicle, every attendant respectfully inclined their head. None spoke, none stared. Their quiet discipline carried an unexpected sense of dignity that eased some of Olivia's fear. The door closed gently behind them, shutting out the cool night air. Inside, the vehicle was elegant without being extravagant, finished with dark wood and soft leather seats. There were no glowing screens or unnecessary decorations, only a peaceful silence broken by the gentle hum of the engine as the procession began moving away from Cedar Ridge. Olivia watched through the window as her neighborhood slowly disappeared behind drifting mist. The familiar streets grew smaller until the final porch. Light vanished beyond the trees. She did not realize she had been holding her breath until Adrian quietly spoke. There is one thing I should tell you before we reach the mountain pass. Olivia turned toward him. His expression had become more serious than at any point during the evening. The people serving me are loyal, he said. The council is wise, though cautious. But beyond the castle walls, there are others who still believe the ancient prophecies should never have been fulfilled. Olivia frowned. You keep mentioning prophecies. What if they are wrong? Adrian looked out the window toward the dark silhouette of the distant mountains. That, he replied, is the question I have been asking myself since the moment you touched the seal. As the convoy rounded the final curve leaving town behind, the clouds unexpectedly parted. Moonlight spilled across the winding mountain highway, illuminating towering stone peaks ahead. Far above them, almost hidden among the cliffs, Olivia caught the faint outline of what appeared to be an enormous castle rising from the mist, its highest tower glowing with a single golden light that seemed to have been waiting for them all along. The convoy climbed steadily through the mountains, leaving the last traces of civilization far below. Olivia rested her forehead lightly against the cool window, watching ribbons of mist drift between towering evergreens as the moon illuminated the winding road ahead. Every mile carried her farther from the ordinary life she had known only hours earlier. She glanced down at the brass key still resting in her hand. For reasons she could not explain, she no longer felt like a stranger holding an unfamiliar object. Instead, it felt as though the key had been waiting for her long before she had ever found the man on the rain-soaked bridge. Adrian remained quietly seated across from her, giving her space to process everything without interruption. After several minutes, Olivia finally broke the silence. When you said there are people who believe the prophecies should never have been fulfilled, what exactly are they afraid of? Adrian folded his hands thoughtfully before answering. They fear change more than danger. For generations, they have built their lives around traditions that have never been questioned. If those traditions are suddenly proven incomplete, many will not know who they are anymore. Olivia considered his words. So this is not really about me. Adrian offered a faint smile. It rarely is. Individuals often become symbols without asking for the responsibility. The vehicle slowed as they approached an enormous stone arch spanning the narrow mountain pass. There were no guards standing beneath it, no gates blocking the road, yet every attendant inside the convoy became noticeably more alert. As the lead vehicle passed beneath the arch, delicate silver markings hidden within the ancient stone began to glow softly, spreading outward like gentle streams of moonlight. Olivia stared in amazement. Did we do that? Adrian looked toward the glowing arch with quiet familiarity. No, the mountain recognized someone it has not welcomed in centuries. Before Olivia could ask another question, the lights faded once again, leaving only weathered stone behind as though nothing unusual had happened. The convoy continued upward until the road opened onto a broad plateau overlooking a breathtaking valley. Rising from the cliffs ahead stood the castle Olivia had glimpsed from a distance. It was larger than she had imagined, its pale towers reflecting the moonlight while hundreds of warm golden windows shone against the night. Rather than appearing cold or intimidating, the ancient fortress carried an unexpected sense of peace, as though countless generations had carefully protected it from the passage of time. As the vehicles approached the entrance, rows of lanterns gradually illuminated one after another without anyone touching them, creating a welcoming path toward the great courtyard. Men and women dressed in elegant dark attire stood waiting on the wide stone steps. They bowed respectfully as Adrian stepped from the vehicle, yet Olivia noticed something unexpected. Many of them looked toward her with quiet curiosity instead of suspicion. Some even appeared hopeful. Adrian walked around the vehicle and opened her door himself. "Welcome," he said, gently, to Blackwood Keep. Olivia stepped onto the smooth stone courtyard, her shoes echoing softly in the cool night air. The castle felt alive in subtle ways she could not describe. Gentle fountains whispered in hidden gardens, climbing ivy-covered ancient walls without hiding their beauty. Somewhere in the distance, music drifted through an open window, peaceful enough to ease the tension that had followed her since leaving home. An elderly woman wearing a deep blue gown slowly descended the front staircase. Her silver hair was neatly gathered behind her shoulders, and her kind eyes rested on Olivia with unmistakable recognition. She stopped a few feet away and bowed, not to Adrian, but to Olivia herself. The unexpected gesture left everyone nearby completely still. Even Adrian looked genuinely surprised. The woman raised her eyes and spoke in a calm voice filled with quiet certainty. "After 600 years," she said, "the castle has finally welcomed its chosen guest home." The elderly woman's words settled over the courtyard with a quiet weight that no one seemed willing to disturb. Olivia instinctively looked behind her, almost expecting the greeting to have been meant for someone else, but every face remained turned toward her. Adrian stood perfectly still, his thoughtful expression revealing that this unexpected welcome had surprised him as much as it had surprised everyone else. The woman stepped forward with measured grace and offered a gentle smile. "My name is Eleanor Ashcroft," she said. "I have served this castle longer than anyone now living remembers. I have waited many years to see whether the final pages of our oldest records would ever become more than forgotten stories." Olivia swallowed nervously. "I think there has been a mistake. I came here because I helped someone during a storm. That is all." Eleanor's smile did not fade. The most extraordinary moments often begin with someone believing they have done only something ordinary. Adrian turned toward Eleanor. "You called her the chosen guest. Explain." The older woman nodded respectfully. "Only after you see this for yourself, Your Majesty." She slowly raised one hand toward the towering entrance behind her. The enormous oak doors opened without a sound, revealing a magnificent entrance hall illuminated by hundreds of warm lanterns suspended beneath an arched ceiling of polished stone. Instead of feeling intimidating, the castle welcomed Olivia with an atmosphere of quiet dignity. Portraits of generations long past lined the walls, while tall windows revealed moonlight spilling across peaceful gardens beyond. As Olivia crossed the threshold, something remarkable happened. One by one, the lanterns brightened, their gentle golden glow spreading through the hall in perfect sequence until every corner shimmered with soft light. Murmurs rose among those gathered nearby. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly before whispering, "The castle remembers." Adrian looked upward at the glowing hall with unmistakable astonishment. "It has never responded like this." Olivia stared around her in disbelief. "I am not doing anything," Eleanor answered gently. "Sometimes presence is enough." They continued deeper into the castle until they reached a circular chamber beneath a magnificent glass dome through which the moon could be seen shining overhead. At the center stood a stone pedestal supporting a large crystal sphere no larger than a basketball. Its surface appeared clear and perfectly still. Adrian stopped several feet away. "The Heart Archive," he said quietly. "It has remained dormant since the reign of my grandfather." Eleanor looked toward Olivia. "Would you place your hand upon it?" Olivia hesitated before looking to Adrian. He gave only a small nod. "No one will force you," he said. "But I would like to understand this as much as you do." Taking a slow breath, Olivia stepped forward. She gently rested her fingertips against the cool crystal. For one silent heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a soft golden light emerged from deep within the sphere, spreading outward like the first rays of dawn. Tiny points of light floated upward through the chamber, surrounding everyone present without heat or sound. Across the walls, ancient carvings hidden beneath centuries of stonework gradually appeared, revealing graceful patterns that had been invisible only moments before. No alarm sounded. No voice echoed. Only a profound stillness filled the room, as though the castle itself had quietly awakened from an age-long sleep. Adrian watched the glowing chamber with calm wonder. Eleanor lowered her head respectfully, tears quietly filling her eyes. Olivia slowly withdrew her hand, and the golden light remained instead of fading. She looked at Adrian, searching for answers neither of them possessed. He stepped beside her and spoke with quiet certainty. "Tonight began with a simple act of kindness on a rain-soaked bridge. Now it has revealed a mystery that belongs to all of us. Whatever this ancient promise truly means, we will uncover it together." Above them, beyond the glass dome, the clouds finally parted completely, and the first light of approaching dawn touched the highest tower of Blackwood Keep, marking not the end of Olivia's journey, but the beginning of a new chapter that would reshape both her ordinary world and the hidden kingdom that had waited centuries to welcome her.